Carleton.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Now, before we begin discussions on regulating content on the internet, let us recognize that Canada has 38 million regulators. They are called customers. They are the people who decide what they watch. With the click of the mouse, they can choose the content that serves their interest. For the same reason, today, now more than ever, the ability to produce unique and diverse content is greater than ever before. The advent of the internet, far from limiting the production of Canadian content, has vastly expanded it by dramatically reducing the cost of production and distribution. If you really think about the cost of producing and distributing content today is probably 99% lower than it was just 25 years ago. You have kids, 14-year-old kids, who can produce their own movie trailers on their laptop computers and broadcast it before as many eyes as want to see it without spending a single dollar beyond the purchase of a little bit of software and a laptop on which to design it. And the quality is probably superior to that which Hollywood would have been able to do just a few decades ago. This has democratized and expanded the scope of content. It has allowed minorities and people with particular interests that are not majoritarian in their popularity to reach audiences. It used to be, back in the old days, you had to compete for real estate in the HMV or the local record store or the local Blockbuster. And if you were not among the top 50, you didn't get that real estate. And so even if your product was interesting to, say, 3% of the public, you couldn't sell it to anybody because you had no means to get it to them and because you could not generate the capital to produce it in the first place. So let us start by acknowledging that the changes to which this bill proposes to respond are actually good changes. They are democratizing changes. They spread out power and diversity, which is something that we should allow and that freedom provides. Now, this government seeks to extend its reach, broaden its tentacles into the internet. Let me quote, "Hear, hear," says the Liberal member across the way. And every once in a while the veil falls and they reveal their true selves. I say they want to extend their tentacles into the internet, and one of the most prominent Liberal MPs says, "Hear, hear." Thank him, Madam Chair, when you have a chance, for his temporary and accidental honesty. So let me quote here Andrew Coyne, far from a conservative, who says in the Globe and Mail, far from a conservative publication, the quote, "The Canadian government's Bill C-10 has opened the door to serious state regulation of the internet." Now, whenever a prime minister who has expressed his admiration for Fidel Castro, for the basic dictatorship of communist China, who has attempted to use this pandemic to extend himself the unmitigated power to raise any tax at any time by any amount till the year 2022, whenever a prime minister who used a debate commission to put Craig Kielburger and other Liberal insiders in control of how the leaders' debate would go, and whenever a prime minister who extends a taxpayer subsidy to the media and then puts the head of Unifor, which is a Liberal-backed organization, in charge of how that money is given out, whenever such a person introduces a bill to extend the power of the state over the internet, we should be very suspicious. Allow me to quote Mr. Coyne, who says, "Well, while the government claims it would not empower the CRTC to regulate smaller services such as BritBox, social media sites such as YouTube, or online news content, the bill contains no specific provision that would prohibit it and includes provisions that seem to allow it. For example, the bill exempts quote, programs that are uploaded to an online undertaking by its users and, quote, online undertakings whose broadcasts consist of only such programs. It leaves leaves the way open for the CRTC to regulate services that show both user-generated and curated content like YouTube." So, What that means is we're opening the door for the CRTC to regulate the kinds of things that everyday Canadians produce and upload onto the internet. We are allowing CRTC, which is an already overly powerful bureaucracy of nameless, faceless government authorities, to potentially extend their regulation into what content people put on the internet. Now, it's no surprise the Prime Minister would want to limit and regulate that kind of content. Often, that kind of independent material uploaded to the internet by everyday Canadians is the only place he faces, outside of this House, where he faces real criticism. He is not protected by the adoring glow of his supporters in the press gallery. So therefore, he has to contend with the scrutiny of everyday Canadians who dare criticize him or his ideological direction, or dare produce content that might contradict his world view. So the government refuses to clearly circumscribe the power of the CRTC, and it opens the door for that power to be extended. We can only assume that that was designed for the very purpose of extending more control over what Canadians watch, read, hear, and produce. That, Madam Chair, is further compounded by the fact that the bill allows the Cabinet order-making power over the CRTC to direct how it will apply these brand new powers that the member across the way is salivating over right now, powers that he said, here, as soon as I suggested that he might have them. Madam Chair, we live in a free country. Everyday, ordinary Canadians should be allowed their own megaphone, and the only limit on how loud and how vast their voices are heard should be whether people choose to listen to them. The ability of everyday Canadians to decide what they like by voting with their click. That is the kind of liberty that we should extend to the Canadian people. And in the marketplace of ideas, there is no role for state coercion and intimidation. There is no role for nameless, faceless government bureaucrats to decide who is heard and who is not. The everyday Canadian people should have the freedom to do that for themselves. And so if we are here on this side of the House of Commons are the only ones to stand up for free speech, then I think that there are a lot of Canadians out there who will stand with us. And we know that we have in the Prime Minister someone who does not believe in free speech. He was asked about free speech, actually, after a French newspaper was the victim of a terrorist attack, and he said whether or not that publication should have freedom of expression. And he said, but freedom of expression is not unlimited, as if to suggest that the attack against that publication was somehow justified on the grounds that the publication had improperly exercised freedom of expression, and that the state ought to have the ability to limit that expression. He then backed down, by the way. He came into the House of Commons, reversed himself completely, swallowed himself whole, realized how much he had humiliated himself by revealing his real thoughts to the Canadian people. But every time this Prime Minister attempts to extend control over what we see, hear, read, and produce, we ought to remember that we ought to view the proposal through the lens of a man who believes in a strong state control over its citizens. We on this side of the House will stand for the ancient liberties that we have inherited from our ancestors and which we hope to bequeath to those that come after us. Thank you.